Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 16 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And we're at the end of January, which can only mean one thing. The pre-draft process is in full swing. All-star games are in full effect. We've got the East-West Shrine game that's going to be kicking off on Thursday, February 1st, and then the top showcase, Jim Nagy putting together yet another great class at the Senior Bowl, Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile, and I can't wait to get into the practices, really see how these guys show up, because I think this is a great crop of guys. We're going to hear a lot of names called in all 3 days of the draft, but I think the first 2 days, there are a lot of guys that have a lot of promise to be coming off the board in the first 3 rounds. And I think what we'll do is we'll go through, take a look at some of the guys that I'm looking forward to at each of the positions for the Senior Bowl. And then obviously, I'm not in Mobile, but I'm going to try to get my hands on as much game film and practice film as possible to be able to really break down some of these guys who really showed up well and who are the guys that really have some work to do as we get into the combine. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the quarterbacks. I think that's the first and foremost, the big thing that everyone's going to be looking at. And obviously you've got the runner-up and number 3 in the Heisman race with Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix. And look, I think if you heard my last podcast talking about the national championship and how Michael Penix Jr. and J.J. McCarthy, both underwhelming performances, and really left the door open for a guy like Bo Nix to step in as that number 4 quarterback, I went back and took a look at Bo Nix's film, and look, I think he's if he can perform at the same level as Michael Penix Jr., if not elevate his game and be the top quarterback at the Senior Bowl, and then duplicate that at the Senior Bowl, then he has a great chance of not only being that number 4 quarterback, but also hearing his name called in the first round. Comfortable off script, keeps his eyes down the field, understands coverages, where to go with the football, arm strength outside the numbers, into tight windows, so there's no issue there as well. He does struggle to come off the first read at times. He'll fall away from pressure. So, those are things that obviously we're going to be taking a look at in this game. 6'3", 214 pounds. He's put to bed any of the issues that we saw at Auburn. Completely different guy. I think a lot of people talk about him having that Oregon offense force-fed to him. So I think this is going to be another opportunity to show what he can do. He can layer the throws over the linebackers in front of the safeties. He can make those downfield throws and understands. Really, I said, talking about understanding coverages. He knows where guys are going to be and where he needs to put a football to really allow his guy to make a play after the catch. I think those are things that jumped out to me for Bo Nix, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do. Michael Penix Jr., on the other hand, 6'3", 218 pounds, flamethrower. That's the thing. The dude can chuck the ball deep, outside the numbers, put it on a dime, or put it on the money, right on the button, and can rifle it into a tight window as well. The guy lacks touch. That's the biggest thing that you've seen. Hurts his intermediate accuracy. He can get disturbed by some constant pressure. We found that out against Michigan. Hadn't really been pressured like that to that point, because really he was playing behind the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. And there was a podcast that I covered as we were getting ready for the Heisman Trophy, where I talked about how Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. were 2 of the quarterbacks that were protected the most. And, to me, I thought that Jaden Daniels, there was just more to his body of work than Nix and Penix Jr. And when you look at Michael Penix Jr., though, I wanted to see against Michigan, see him escape like he did against Texas, being able to sidestep, avoid that rush coming right up the middle, reset and fire. One of the things that he wasn't able to do was reset those feet. If he's stepping back, throwing off a back foot, or when he's rolling out, suddenly that arm talent, you lose it, because he looked very pedestrian on the move when he couldn't reset his feet, and that's really on a lot of those intermediate throws. Rather than showing any touch, he's trying to gun it in there. That throw against USC where he finds Devin Culp along the sideline, that's a throw down the field as he's rolling out, So that arm strength is on display, but touch is really the biggest issue for him. He does do a great job coming off his first man, finding that secondary option. We saw that in the game against Michigan, and we saw it really all year long. So he's an excellent processor. Obviously, the biggest issue is going to be health, and we're going to be seeing really what the medicals, if they check out at the combine. 4 years at Indiana, 4 straight season-ending injuries. But he stayed healthy to this point at Washington. That's really going to be the head-to-head matchup that you want to see at the quarterback spot. Obviously, there's also Spencer Rattler and Michael Pratt. I think we've got 6 quarterbacks. I mentioned, Nix and Penix Jr. and J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels. Then obviously at the top you also have Caleb Williams, Drake May. There's your top 6. Who's going to be number 7? Who's going to be that next quarterback? I think it could end up coming down to Spencer Rattler and Michael Pratt, and I'm circling Spencer Rattler here. 6'1", 200. Started out at OU, had a really nice redshirt freshman season. Struggled to get things going there for OU in his sophomore year. Was benched in favor of Caleb Williams. Ends up going to South Carolina, moving with Shane Beamer, who was coaching the special teams there at OU. And obviously, kind of a rocky start to his junior season. Threw a lot of picks, 12 in total. But his performance at the end of the season was really what was impressive. Against Tennessee, against Clemson, he beat 2 top 10 teams back-to-back weeks. Over 72% completion percentage, just under 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You love the arm strength. You love the mobility as well. 7 rushing touchdowns there at South Carolina. Spencer Rattler, to me, I think the biggest throw of his, you're actually watching Xavier Legette get deep, and he actually has a defensive tackle in his face and basically delivering this huge blow, but he stands in the pocket, is able to throw the ball a good 50-plus yards down the field on the money, in stride, hitting his receiver, Legette, for a big touchdown. This is a guy who has the goods. It's just a matter of whether or not he can put it all together and play consistently. Michael Pratt, look, 6'2", 200. He's improved every season, much like Spencer Rattler has. But look, against Power 5 opponents, he's played against 4. And you look at it, and 55.2% completion percentage, just 218 passing yards per game, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The team went 2-2 in those games. One of those was that victory over USC, but he was just 8 of 17. That's 47.1% completion percentage. Did hit 2 big touchdown passes, ended up with 234 yards and 2 scores, but really that was Tyjae Spears who should be getting most of that credit, because he was the guy that really was the bell cow for the Green Wave in that win over USC at the Cotton Bowl. But he's very athletic and knows what to do with the football. Doesn't make a ton of mistakes. Does have 26 interceptions in his career, but look, 8 interceptions in each of his first 2 seasons, had 8 total in his final 2 years. Biggest thing is that jump in competition. How's he going to show up? That's really what we're going to be seeing there at the Senior Bowl is, can he keep pace with those other 3? Obviously, when we talk about the Senior Bowl, the matchups that everybody wants to see are the one-on-ones. So you're talking about wide receivers and corners, but I'm going to really start in the trenches. We're going to talk about offensive tackles going against edge rushers. And when you look at this offensive tackle group, no Olu Fashanu, no Joe Alt, no J.C. Latham, no Amarius Mims. Those are 4 of the top offensive tackle prospects. But what you do have, I think Fashanu and Joe Alt, I think Alt is the more complete player. Fashanu has all the athleticism and is kind of that flashier player. But after that, number 3, who's it going to be? I think you could see 2 right tackles in competition there, and they're not named J.C. Latham. I'm looking at Taliese Fuaga out of Oregon State, Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. Fuaga, 6'6", 334 pounds. This is a guy who hasn't given up a sack in his career, just 23 total pressures, and this is a guy who is very athletic, does get caught at times oversetting, can get susceptible to that inside move, but Very, very athletic for a guy his size. Slides, the kick slide, very smooth, but the power is there. The grip strength, the power in his hands, can anchor very well. And then when he climbs to the second level, he's head hunting. He's looking to take guys out on the move. And, that aggressive nature, he's a guy to me, you look at him at right tackle, just pencil him in as a day one starter. And so, could he end up cracking the top 10? I think that's a little rich, but, definitely a guy that could be a top 20 pick. I look at Tyler Guyton the same way. 6'7", 327 pounds. The more I watch, the more I like. No sacks given up this past season. Only 2 in his career. And what's impressive is he started his career at TCU as an H-back. And so he has that athleticism, H-back, tight end. You see the footwork, very athletic. He rivals Olu Fashanu, if you can believe it. And then the power. Man, he's got some power in his hands. He will strike and knock guys to the ground. I'm looking forward to seeing the 2 of them display that power in the one-on-ones. 2 other guys to really talk about there in the first round. Kingsley Suamataia, 6'6", 325 out of BYU. Tremendously athletic. I think that's another thing that you see with him. It's so effortless with the kick slide. His ability to climb to the second level. I mean, he looks like a tight end moving out there at times. The big question for me is the physicality. I heard some people talking about him being a road grader, but I watched him also climb to the second level. And, I know that you can still make a block by just getting in the way, but this is the guy I'm looking for him to finish. Find a guy, locate him, get your hands on him, and ultimately drive him down the field, drop him to the ground. And I didn't see that. I saw way too often he'd get out there to that second level, and he almost looked like he was lost at times. And so I really want to see what Suamataia can do. Obviously, the athleticism is what you can't teach. You can teach a lot of those other things. That athleticism you just can't teach. Want to see him get a little bit stronger as well. You love the length. You love the athleticism for sure. Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, 6'6", 320 pounds. This is a dude that could have come out and been a potential first-rounder at the end of the 2022 season. Had just 1 sack, 17 total pressures, and ends up having a knee injury that really took out that season at the end of the year, but comes back in 2023 and looks sharp. You love the knee bend. You love his ability to anchor. I think he's athletic enough to play tackle. There are some that are thinking he may kick inside to guard. Battles against Laiatu Latu. We're going to get to see more of that here at the Senior Bowl. And I think Jordan Morgan is a guy that has a chance to sneak into the end of round 1. 2 other names to talk about. Patrick Paul out of Houston, Javon Foster out of Missouri. Patrick Paul, 6'7", 315. This is a guy that's just continued to get better and better there for the Cougars. Just 9 total pressures, 1 sack this past season. Really a polished game. He can be physical when you need him to be, very athletic as well, tremendous length. And then when you look at Javon Foster out of Missouri, 6'5", 319 pounds, 13 total pressures, just 1 sack this past year. This is a guy, 53 pressures and 8 sacks in his career. So what he's done this past season, really tightening things up. You see the length, the strength, the power in his game. Anchors well in pass protection, very powerful as a run blocker, but does he have the lateral agility and the foot speed to stay square to those edge rushers? That's going to be a big question mark. If he can answer that question, then I think Foster solidifies his status probably as a 3rd rounder, but he's one of those guys that I'm really looking forward to seeing play because I think he could really improve that draft stock. Now we get to the edge rushers. And look, I got to give it up to Laiatu Latu, the 6'4", 265-pound edge rusher out of UCLA. He could have done what a lot of the other edge rushers did and opt out of the Senior Bowl, but he's there to show that he's better than Dallas Turner. He's better than Jared Verse, better than Chop Robinson, better than Braylon Trice, better than Jonah Ellis. So he's a guy that's going to show up, and you want to talk about a complete edge rusher. That's what I see, in Laiatu Latu, the best pure pass rusher in this group, and and really in the draft. I think he can solidify his status as a top 10 pick. You love the bend. You love the quick first step. He explodes out of his stance. And then the handwork. that's one of the things that you just absolutely love. You'll see a variety of pass rush moves with those hands, but that patented rip move as he's dipping and he's turning the corner, he really uses that outside arm to his advantage, because he'll hook it and he'll kind of use that almost to pivot his way around and flatten out and get to the quarterback. So that's something that I'm looking forward to see him. Look, this is a dude who just was absolutely dominant in his 2 years there at UCLA. 15 sacks this past season, 36 hurries, 62 total pressures, 26.2% win rate. Obviously, this is a guy the medicals need to check out. That's the big thing. I think of a guy like Miles Jack with his knee and the degenerative issues, went from a potential top 10 pick to falling all the way to round number 2. Laiatu Latu, if you're not familiar with his issues, he had a head and neck injury at Washington, ultimately was medically retired from the game, if you will, by the Washington coaches. Found an independent doctor that ultimately cleared him. UCLA doctors cleared him, and obviously the rest is history. Those medicals need to check out for him. I think they will. He's been healthy there at UCLA, and he's been a dominant figure. If that's the case, I think he'll end up being the first defensive player taken in this draft. Outside of that, obviously Chris Braswell is another guy that I really want to watch. 6'3", 260, a guy who was consistently putting pressure on the quarterback. Look, he's got Dallas Turner on the other side. I think there's an argument that can be made about guys playing opposite those studs. You look at Will Anderson Jr., what's going to happen with Dallas Turner? Dallas Turner's still a top-notch edge rusher, so then the question was Chris Braswell, is it a lot of the fact that he was playing opposite Dallas Turner? I really don't think that's the case. I think this is a guy that could end up being a difference maker at the next level. Really want to see what he can do. Can he bend the edge and get after the quarterback early and often there at the Senior Bowl? A couple of the bigger dudes, and then we'll get to some of the speedy guys. Darius Robinson out of Missouri, 6'5", 296. Brandon Dorlus, 6'3", 290 out of Oregon. Darius Robinson, to me, is a guy that's continuing to move up draft boards. 8.5 sacks this past season, 14 tackles for loss. This is a guy that continues to win. Look, 17% win rate in 2023, 27 hurries as well. This is a guy that is versatile enough to play a 5 technique. He can play inside at a 3 technique. Look, line him up in an even man front at a defensive end, and I think he could get the job done as well. So physical at the point of attack, setting the edge against the run as well. Physicality, you love his handwork. Very powerful. The speed to power is evident as well. He's a guy to watch out for. I think he can really continue to improve that draft stock. Brandon Dorlus is another guy. He's too quick for the interior lineman, but he'll use that leverage to his advantage. Plays with tremendous pad level, and he's going to get underneath that offensive tackle, forklift him back. I'm looking forward to seeing that. This is a guy as well, knows what to do when the football's in the air. 14 pass breakups in his career. Keep an eye out for Brandon Dorlus. And then Justin Eboigbe. There wouldn't be a season without an Alabama 34 defensive end. Last year was Byron Young. This year is Justin Eboigbe, 6'5", 292. A guy that I think continues to put solid pressure on the quarterback. 7 sacks this past season. So he's continuing to impress with his ability to shed blockers, get into the backfield, both against the run and the pass. So he's a guy that I'm definitely looking forward to. I think he did a really solid job. 30 run tackles, according to Pro Football Focus. Just 2 missed tackles against the run. And, so I think Eboigbe is a guy that, wants to showcase that he's not just stout against the run, but he's a guy that can also get after the quarterback. So expect him to have some pretty solid reps there in the one-on-ones as well. Let's talk about some speed guys. Adisa Isaac out of Penn State, and Nelson Caesar out of Houston. 2 of the quickest first steps of any edge rushers in this group, not named Laiatu Latu. With Isaac, 6'4", 249 out of Penn State. 9 sacks this past season. A guy that's just continued to get better and better each and every year there at Penn State. I think he was the forgotten man because everyone wants to talk about Chop Robinson and that explosive first step and the ability to just drive into the backfield in a hurry. But Adisa Isaac was consistent. And that's the thing that you really want to see. Can he consistently get after the quarterback here at the Senior Bowl? Nelson Caesar, 6'3", 250, another undersized defensive end, but such a quick first step. He's a guy that I think is going to be that situational pass rusher, but a guy that, look, when you're talking about 9.5, 10 sacks in 2023, a guy that, has proven that he can get after the quarterback. Look, 10 sacks, 17 in his career, but it's those 10 sacks. A guy that teams are going to want to put him on their roster to allow him to get after the quarterback. I think he'll ultimately be a 34 outside linebacker, more so than a defensive end, but we'll have to see where he ends up falling there in the draft. A guy that I think probably will end up being probably in that 4th to 5th round range because he is more of a situational pass rusher right now, but a guy to definitely keep an eye on. And speaking of keeping an eye on guys, Austin Booker out of Kansas is one of the more intriguing players. So athletic at 6'4", 245. Played just 6 games in Minnesota in 2022. Transfers to Kansas. He's a redshirt sophomore. Ends up with 9 sacks, 48 total pressures, 14.8% win rate. A guy that I thought, wanted to see him come back and really challenge for, potential spot in the first round. But he's decided to enter the draft, and a guy that I think could end up having, he's a boomer bust type of prospect because you don't know a lot about him. There's just the 1 year of heavy production there in Big 12 play. So what can he do at this level, and can he bring it on a consistent basis? That's something that I really want to see. And then Javon Solomon out of Troy, 6'2", 249, kind of an undersized edge rusher. But look, the production there at the group of 5, 17 sacks this past season, 48 total pressure, 17.1% win rate. One thing is evident. This is a guy that can get after the quarterback. He's quick. He's relentless. And you love the motor, a guy that's going to continue. Can he play the run? I think that's really one of the big question marks for him. But a guy that I think could end up putting on a show as an edge rusher. One last guy to talk about, and that's going to be Cedric Johnson. Well, 2 guys, really. Cedric Johnson out of Mississippi, Brennan Jackson out of Washington State. Cedric Johnson, 6'3", 265. You love the length. 19 sacks in his career. He's strong at the point of attack, very powerful. Can he bend? That's the big question mark. And then Brennan Jackson, 6'4", 263 out of Washington State. You love the length with this guy. 8.5 sacks this past season, 20.5 in his career. He and Ron Stone Jr., it seemed like they were there at Wazoo forever. And he's one of those guys that has really grown on me as I've watched Pac-12 play over the last few years. Has just continued to get better and better and better. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do out there at the Senior Bowl in the one-on-ones. Which I know we'll get to the interior linemen, but we got to talk about receivers and corners, right? That's really what where the showcase is going to be. No Malik Neighbors, no Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze. They're not going to be there, but no Xavier Worthy or Adonai Mitchell or Troy Franklin either. But 2 receivers that have a chance to go in round 1 will be there. The first one's going to be Xavier Legette, 6'3", 227. We just talked about him, with the Spencer Rattler referral there. And this is a guy that, look, I think he had, just over 400 yards receiving in his career until 2023 with a huge breakout, 97 total targets, 71 receptions for 1,255 yards, just 17.7 yards per reception, by the way, and 7 touchdowns. I saw some insane numbers, Pro Football Focus and others were noting that he ran over 23 miles an hour. So I get these DK Metcalf vibes when I look at him, right? Big, physical, and a guy that can get vertical in a hurry. Can he, we know they can run the vertical routes, but can he sink his hips and drive and run routes? That's going to be something that everyone's going to be looking at. DK Metcalf showed up at the combine and ran some of the slowest 3-cone drill and short shuttles. Maybe the NFL has learned their lesson with that, but if Legette does the same thing, then I worry that he may end up slipping to round number 2 because of that, even though you'd think that the NFL would have learned their lesson with DK Metcalf. Devontez Walker, look, 6'3", 192 there out of North Carolina. We know that he ran into some issues there getting onto the field. Transfer from Kent State, was ruled ineligible and ultimately found his way onto the field. And look, he still ended up getting targeted 66 times, 41 catches, just under 700 yards, 17 yards per reception, 7 touchdowns. Was a difference maker there for Drake May. Was his number one target, a guy that can get vertical. You want to see the route running. That's one of the big things with him. Can he be an effective route runner? One of the things that I love, though, was he caught 10 of his 17 contested balls, contested catches. That catch rate is just under 60%. He's a guy that I think could be a downfield weapon. I think Devontez Walker to Kansas City just feels like that's going to end up happening. That could be a potential match made in heaven for Patrick Mahomes. I think they hit with Rashee Rice. They're looking for a receiver. It could be Devontez Walker. We'll see what he does there at the Senior Bowl. Malachi Corley. There's a lot of talk with him. You look at him, 5'11", 210 out of Western Kentucky. And is he the next Deebo Samuel? I feel like he's Deebo Samuel light. He doesn't run. He's not as explosive, doesn't run as polished of the routes, but he's physical after the catch, much like Deebo Samuel. Can do a little bit of everything for you. So that's one of the things that's intriguing. 13 drops in his career is a bit of a concern, but he's a guy that I think teams are going to be looking at. Can he be a polished route runner? I think that's going to really impact that draft stock. If we're looking at guys in the slot, I think there may be no one better than Jacob Cowling out of Arizona, 5'11", 170 pounds. Look, this guy was targeted 121 times this past season. You're going to look at it and say, all right, he had 6 drops. That's a 6.4% drop rate. And so you're going to also look at the 33 drops in his career on 495 targets. That's about a 10% drop rate in his career. So obviously that is a concern. That's the biggest concern that you're going to have with Jacob Cowling. He's got to show that he's a sure-handed guy, that he's a natural pass catcher. Don't let that ball get into his body. Teams are going to be looking at that because here's the thing. He runs tremendous routes. He knows how to get open and can really plant and explode away from guys. You remember seeing Zay Flowers just really leaving guys in the dust. I think Jacob Cowling has a chance to be able to do that. A couple of the bigger receivers I want to see, Johnny Wilson out of Florida State, 6'7", 237, the long strider. Look, in 2022 he had a 20.9 yard per reception average. We know that he's a guy that can get down the field in a hurry if you let him stride out. He's a red zone option. He's got a huge catch radius, but can he separate in that short area quickness? That's really going to be the big question mark. I look at him. Why not, convert him into a tight end, be a Darren Waller type? I think that's something that could potentially be in the cards there for Johnny Wilson. Can you imagine him playing tight end with the way that he's able to run down the field? I think it's something to consider. I'll be curious to see if he ends up getting any time there at that tight end position at the Senior Bowl. Brendan Rice out of USC. Obviously, we know the bloodlines. The GOAT, Jerry Rice, his son, 6'3", 210. And look, 17.6 yards per reception with 12 touchdowns. He's 210 pounds and 6'3", and a guy that can get vertical in a hurry. That's something that definitely jumps off the film. Can he be a polished route runner? That's a big question mark for me. 10 drops on 179 targets. That's just 8.3 drop percentage. Only had 2 drops this past season. But my biggest thing is that contested catch rate. 25%. For a guy that big, you worry about his ability to play through contact. Can he go up and win those 50-50 balls? That's something that I really want to see with Brendan Rice. Can he be a physical guy? He should be more physical than that for a guy that's as big as he is. Lab McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, 2 guys that are tremendous route runners. So sudden with their ability to get out of the breaks. They're a lot faster than I think guys expect as well. So they'll be 2 guys I'm keeping an eye on as well. When I look at Ricky Pearsall, the catch, good Lord, the catch of the year, his ability to kind of backhand that football down the middle of the field. I still don't know how he was able to haul that in, but he's a guy that I think his hands are going to be on display for sure. He and Lab McConkey both. And then Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, the brother of Christian McCaffrey, 6'2", 195 pounds. The thing that is so impressive with him is his contested catch percentage is 61.5%. That's on 52 total targets there, 32 receptions. That contested catch rate is even better than Marvin Harrison's. Marvin Harrison had a contested catch rate of 52.5% on 61 receptions. On 61 targets in his career. So obviously that's something that is impressive there with Luke McCaffrey. Obviously Luke McCaffrey's played a couple more years than Marvin Harrison, I know, but still, when you look at the percentage still is impressive. And so that's something that I think Luke McCaffrey, is going to be putting on display. A guy that, look, he's not explosive like Marvin Harrison Jr., but a guy that could be a solid possession receiver at the next level. Look, Justin Watson has really carved a niche out for himself. And so I look at Luke McCaffrey. He could potentially be a guy that could slide right into a role like that. Corners, who are the guys that are covering him? Top guy for me is Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. Because obviously there's no Terrion Arnold, there's no Kool-Aid McKinstry, there's no Nate Wiggins. But Quinyon Mitchell to me is a guy that could end up being that fourth corner taken. The big question mark, obviously, when he was at Toledo, the Rockets had him mostly in off coverage, mostly in zone. Can he be a solid impress man? I think if he can show that he can still also be impress man and be a top cover guy, and then also run that 4-3 that everyone thinks he's going to run at the combine, then it's a done deal that he's a first rounder. This is a guy that was on my radar from day one there at Toledo. 19 pass breakups in 2022, 5 interceptions, 45 total pass breakups in his career. I mean, that's insane. And then you look at 2023, 17 forced incompletions. That's a 27% forced incompletion rate. This is a guy, look, 6', 200. To me, you want to see him take on some of the bigger boys, see what he can also do against guys that are the route runners. I'm looking forward to seeing him perform. I was loving, the fact that Ennis Rakestraw was going to be there, but he had that core injury surgery. Really bummed about that. This is a guy who has tremendous ball skills, very physical, a guy that I think can be a playmaker on the outside and has a chance to be a first-round pick as well. Outside of those two, there's some undersized guys that really jump out to me. Kalen King, 5'11", 189 pounds, but he plays bigger than his size. A guy that's going to play through the receiver's hands any chance that he gets, can jump out of the building. So those 50-50 balls, come on, Kalen King is right there. When you think quarterback thinks he's got that height advantage, he's going to show those bunnies and make a play on the football. So you love that. The lack of size. Is he a guy that could be a Trent McDuffie type? I think that's something that we're really going to want to see. Mikey Sainristil, come on, out of Michigan, 5'10", 182 pounds. This guy had 37 receptions, 14.6 yards per reception, 2019 to 2021 as a receiver. Then he moves over to the defensive side of the football, and you can definitely see that that's on display. I think this past season was really where he took hold. Had 6 interceptions and just really seemed to be at home, comfortable in coverage. This guy as a nickel, sure tackler in the open field as well, a nose for coming up and run support. He just understands what the receivers are going to do, understands routes. To me, I look at Mikey Sainristil, and if he can have a solid Senior Bowl and then a solid combine, I'm looking at Mikey Sainristil as the guy that we should be penciling in round number 2. Chris Abrams-Drain, another receiver, converted receiver, 5'11", 178 pounds. This is a guy, 7 interceptions in his career, 34 pass breakups. Another guy who's played on the outside. I think he may end up moving inside either to the slot or the nickel, but a guy, tremendous ball skills, does a great job locating the football and goes up and attacks the football in the air. Kalen Carson, look, this guy's battled injuries. He didn't finish the last 3 years due to injury. He's mostly on the outside, also in the slot. He's a guy that, is he, how healthy is he going to be? 6', 195. I think he's a guy that is one of the better cover corners. Really want to see that displayed here. Josh Newton, out of TCU, 6 foot, 190 pounds. Played in a lot of games, 59 games played. Had 7 interceptions in his career, 6 in one season, I want to say. Started his career at ULM with the TCU. The 6 interceptions were in 2022. Thought his play dropped off a bit in 2023. I think this is a way to redeem himself. I think Max Melton at 6 foot, 190 pounds, he's the guy that I'm going to really be watching for. 8 interceptions in his career. Also 8.5 tackles for loss. Likes to play around the line of scrimmage. That's going to be a lot of fun to keep an eye on for. And then you look at the HBCU entrant there at the cornerback position, Willie Drew out of Virginia State. 6 foot, 185 pounds. What got him here? Well, I mean, after he transferred from James Madison to Virginia State in those 2 seasons, 2022, 2023, all he did was put up 11 interceptions and 34 pass breakups. That in and of itself will turn some heads. Also have 4.5 tackles for loss. So a guy that, it looks like can play around the line of scrimmage. I haven't really gotten to see the guy play. I'm looking forward to seeing it because ultimately if he's a guy that can hold his own against some of these elite receivers, then he's the guy that's going to start rising up those draft boards real quick. So receivers, corners, those are going to be some of the matchups I'm looking at. Now let's move to the interior of that offensive line and the defensive tackles. That's going to be another matchup that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And when we talk about D tackles, Byron Murphy II. Look, no Johnny Newton, no Jerzon Newton, but Byron Murphy II is a guy that could end up being either the first or second defensive tackle taken. 6'1", 308, 19.6% win rate, 36 hurries, 6 sacks. This is a guy that is going to win with speed. That's something that is absolutely evident. A guy that's going to look to get up the field, quick off the football, arm over for days. You love the hand usage, but he can also hold the point of attack. Plays with excellent leverage that allows him to anchor, hold the point of attack, then be able to shed the block and make a play on the run game as well. His running mate, T'Vondre Sweat, look, 6'4", 362 pounds. And this dude, I mean, come on. 31 total pressures, 15.3% win rate as a pass rusher at 362 pounds. Are you freaking kidding me? This is a guy that, yes, he is stout at the point of attack. He's one of those guys that can eat up blockers. I think Jalen Ford had to love playing behind these 2 D tackles, the linebacker who will also be here at the Senior Bowl. And by here, I'm not at the Senior Bowl, but we're talking about it, so I say here. But with Sweat, he also does a great job with his hands to shed the blocks, and then you see the short area burst to pursue the running back down the line of scrimmage and make a play. He's so athletic. He may not be quite on the same level of Jordan Davis, but I'm really curious to see, could he run a sub 540 at 362 pounds? That's really a big question mark. What's he really going to show up at? What's he going to weigh at the combine? And what type of speed are we going to see? I think teams really fell in love with Jordan Davis and the athleticism, and then he shows up, runs a 4.78 at 340 pounds, and that really solidified his status in round number 1. Is T. Sweat going to come off the board in round 1? Maybe not. There's a good chance that, great chance that he'll probably end up being a second-round pick. But if he can show off that athleticism, maybe he can sneak his way up into the back end of round number 1. Braden Fiske out of Florida State. Look, 6'5", 297. The world really got to see just the 1 year there at Florida State, but he's been a guy that's been busting his butt there at Western Michigan as well. He's so quick off the football, excellent motor, a guy that's going to be stout at the point of attack as well. You're going to see a lot of speed to power. I expect to see some forklifts, driving guys back, collapsing pockets. He's a guy that is just a lot of fun to watch because the motor never turns off. So that's something that's definitely fun to watch as well. 6 sacks coming from that defensive tackle spot for the Seminoles. Outside, I think those are the top 3 guys at the defensive tackle spot, but I'm looking at a guy like Dwayne Carter out of Duke, 6'3", 300. And a guy, look, in his career, 24 and a half tackles for loss, 12 sacks, 11 pass breakups, 7 forced fumbles in 50 games there for the Blue Devils. But when I look at what he did in 2023, upon initial review, it's like just 1 sack, 3.5 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups is nice, but he just seemed to disappear at times. And that was really at first glance. The more I started watching him, his ability to speed to power, driving guys into the backfield, and look, he may not have actually gotten home, but he was still able to register and record some of those pressures. You look at 18 total hurries this past season, according to Pro Football Focus. So he's a guy, to me, with a good showing there at the Senior Bowl, could solidify his status on day 2. Undersized defensive tackles. There are a few in this draft class, and they're going to be there at the Senior Bowl. Michael Hall Jr. of Ohio State and Tyler Davis of Clemson. They're both 6'2". Hall's a little bit lighter at 285. Tyler Davis is at 300. You've got Marcus Harris. Is he a defensive end? Is he a defensive tackle? He's 6'2", 279. But I look at all 3 of these guys, and it's that explosiveness. It's the ability to win off the line of scrimmage and get into the backfield. That's really the big thing. Tyler Davis has had some injuries. That's going to be a big concern. So I think teams are going to do a lot of their homework there with him. Michael Hall Jr., a guy that's going to get up the field, look to pressure you. And then Marcus Harris is a guy that I think this past season had 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. This was really his big year. He started at Kansas for two seasons. Then he moves on to Auburn, and really it was 2023 where he put it all together. These are going to be 3 guys that I think teams will be comparing, looking at some of those undersized 3 techniques, guys that could end up being those interior pass rushers. They're going to be going up against the likes of Troy Fautanu, Cooper Beebe, Christian Haynes, 3 of the top 4 or 5 guards in this draft. Fautanu, left tackle there for the Joe Moore Award-winning Washington Huskies. You see the athleticism. You love his technique. A guy that's going to get on to the next level and shows off that athleticism. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl guard, Pro Bowl level guard at the next level. 6'4", 312 pounds. Definitely looking forward to seeing him in some of these matchups. And so, if Fautanu has the athleticism, Cooper Beebe is going to be the mauler, a guy that's just going to look to beat you up. 6'4", 322 pounds. Man, you get him in space, and he just delivers just some huge hits. Very physical. That's something that I think absolutely jumps off the film. But you look at him, not only has he played, most of his time has been at left guard, but just under 800 snaps at left tackle, about 475 snaps at right tackle, a little bit at right guard as well. So you love that versatility to his game. He's one of those guys that I could see just stoning guys, just anchoring and not allowing any movement. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And then Christian Haynes, I mentioned, 6'2", 313 pounds, a guy that plays with a lot of leverage. That's something that I think definitely jumps off the film when I watch him play. Has given up just 1 sack and just 2 hits in the last 2 seasons. So that's something that I think is definitely impressive when you watch him play. After that, Graham Barton out of Duke. 6'5", 314 pounds. He was a left tackle at Duke. Has a little bit of experience at center. 430 snaps in his career. Those were all in 2020. He's battled some injuries, so I think there's going to be a concern there. I think that may be what moves him out of round number 1. The other question mark is really where do you play him? The lack of arm length will likely kick him inside. Is he a center? Is he a guard? I think at the end of the day, he's just an athletic football player who's continuing to get better with that power and strength. I want to see, is he healthy enough, first of all, to be playing at the Senior Bowl? If he is, then he's a guy that I think could end up surprising some people because I think he can win at a lot of different positions there. Speaking of a guy that can play different positions, Dominic Pooney out of Kansas, 6'5", 320 pounds, the junior. Look, no sacks, no hits, just 8 total pressures this past season there for, as a left tackle for the Jayhawks. Look, in 2022, didn't give up a sack, just 8 total pressures as well. A guy that has just been very polished but lacks some of the length, lacks some of that ideal foot speed. A guy that I think can kick inside and be a starter early on at guard. A guy that could end up finding his way into day 2 consideration. I think a big game, a big week here at the Senior Bowl. That's something that we could absolutely see. There's some other tackles that'll probably kick inside to guard. Sataoa Laumea, they're out of Utah. He's played a lot of right guard and some right tackle. I think he ultimately needs to slide inside. Really struggled at times there at that right tackle position. Really left guard or right guard is going to be his home, probably on the right side. Ladarius Henderson out of Michigan. This was a guy at Arizona State, was just an absolute stud at guard. And then he's moved outside to left tackle, and I thought foot speed, again, he struggled with that. Lack of ideal length also got him into trouble. 6'4", 315. Get him inside to guard. That's where he belongs. Isaiah Adams of Illinois. Looking forward to seeing what he can do, because he's better suited at guard as well. He's a guy that can drive, really create some movement in the run game. Could probably be a solid pass protector as well at that guard spot. Has no business playing right tackle. Want to see what he can do inside a guard. And then the centers. We got 3 of the top 4 centers in this draft class. Actually, I should say 4 of the top 5. Zach Frazier. This is the guy who was a 4-time high school champion wrestler. 6'4", 306 pounds. Just 7 total pressures given up this year. Plays with excellent leverage. He's got a mean streak to him. A guy that is going to look to the grip strength and then the torque to be able to drive guys, to turn them and drive them into the ground. He's a lot of fun to watch. I think the more I watch him, the more I've solidified. He's my number 1 center. Number 2 is going to be Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. 6'3", 320 pounds. Look, just one hurry. That was his only pressure in 2023. Just 2 total pressures in 2022. And look, at 2022, he played at right guard. Most of his time, a little bit of left guard. 1 play at left guard, a little bit at center, a little bit of right tackle. But 2023 moved to the pivot and was a Remington Award or Remington Trophy winner, showing the ability to climb to the second level and just punish guys. And so that's something that I think definitely jumps out. I think those are 2 guys that are looking to really separate themselves from the rest of the group. Cedric Van Prawn has a lot of experience, 6'4", 310 pounds. You just worry about the lack of ideal arm length. That's really a big concern there with him. But, man, he's played in a lot of big games for Georgia, and, 34 pressures, given up just 1 sack in his career. I think he's a guy that may fall just a little bit because of some of the other guys that are ahead of him, but to me, he's one of those guys who's got a pretty polished game overall, outside of the lack of ideal arm length. And then Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin, 6'4", 310 pounds. This is a guy who is tremendously athletic. He's played all over the line there for the Badgers, at least 175 snaps at 4 positions. Obviously, center is the main spot there. That's where he'll be at the next level. But that athleticism, his ability to climb to the next level, his ability to anchor against the bull rush, and then the lateral agility to pick up guys, blitzers. Bortolini's a guy that I think is flying under the radar, and with a solid performance there at the Senior Bowl, he's one of those guys that I think more people will be talking about him. I think that's evident for me. So that'll now take us to the tight ends. No Brock Bowers, no Jatavian Sanders, no Cade Stover, which gives this group a chance to really showcase what they can do. I'm looking at Ben Sinnott, 6'4", 247 out of K-State. I want to see what this guy, looks like as a tight end, primarily because, look, he played all over the place. He was a fullback, he was an H-back, tight end, a guy that could, he was in the slot, played him a little bit out wide, in line as well. But look, 669 yards receiving, 13.9 yards per reception, 6 touchdowns. He did a little bit of everything there for the Wildcats, and I think he's one of those guys that wants to be able to show that, hey, I can play tight end. Yes, I played a lot of different positions, but I can be a solid tight end. He's one of those guys that I think is going to be trying to make a push to be a top 5 tight end in this draft. Jared Wiley out of TCU, 6'7", 260. He's a monster of a dude. Teams love the size. And look, he scored 8 touchdowns. He's a red zone freak with that size. I think that's something that definitely jumps out when you watch him play. They lined him up wide at times there with the Horned Frogs. And, just put the ball up, let him go and attack the football. That's something that you're going to absolutely see from him. Jaheim Bell, what is he? Is he an H-back? Is he a buffed-up receiver? He's 6'3", 230, a weapon that, look, he lined up in the slot, lined up in line, a lot of times at that H-back spot. Did have 4 drops this past season, but a guy that, could be a mismatch with coverages. Could be too big for safeties and too quick for linebackers. So it'll be interesting to see him in those one-on-ones. One more guy for me is Tanner McLaughlin. A lot of talk about a lot of tight ends not named Tanner McLaughlin, and I think he's one of those sleepers. 6'5", 240 pounds, 45 catches for 530 yards and 4 touchdowns this past season. But if Noah Fafita got into trouble, I know that he had Tetaroa McMillan and Jacob Cowing at his disposal, but Tanner McLaughlin was a guy that they could find, whether it was in the flat, up the seam, running a corner route, crossing routes. He was a reliable target. No drops this past season. A guy that just continued to find ways to make plays for the Wildcats. And he's just a guy that's flying under the radar and a guy that I think could end up turning some heads. I really do. Running backs. I think everybody's going to be talking about Marshawn Lloyd. He's probably the top back in this Senior Bowl class. 5'9", 212 pounds. Started his career at South Carolina. Transferred to USC. 816 yards on the ground. 7.1 yards per carry. 9 touchdowns. There were 3 fumbles, which obviously that's a concern. And when you look at him overall, I want to say there were 8 fumbles in his career, 8 or 9 fumbles. The ball security is something that's going to definitely be a concern for sure with him. But what you love about him are his feet. Such quick feet, the ability to make these jump cuts, make defenders miss in the backfield, in the hole, and then that lateral quickness to bounce it to the outside, and has tremendous speed. He was a difference maker for that Trojan offense. When he was in the game, difference maker. Able to make catches out on the outside and knows what to do with it as a pass catcher. 34 receptions in his career. Marshawn Lloyd, really the ball security is going to be the biggest question mark more than anything else. Another guy who's put together some pretty good tape and has showcased his ability to make plays as both a runner and a receiver, and that's going to be Ray Davis out of Kentucky. 5'9", 205. Look, he transfers from Vanderbilt to Kentucky, goes over 1,100 yards, 5.7 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns, 6 fumbles in his career. Not something that you necessarily want to see, but man, you love his ability on the outside. He runs with a low pad level between the tackles, can be very physical. The contact balance is there, and then 32 receptions, 10.1 yards per reception. Watching him run some wheel routes, his ability to adjust to the football is phenomenal. And then Cody Schrader out of Missouri. What a freaking story. 5'9", 215 pounds, and it's one of those stories that you just can't write, right? Started his career at Truman State. That's crazy. Truman State in Kirksville. And Truman State, also known as Northeast Missouri State. That's what it was known as when my dad went to school there. So a four-year stud at Truman State, transfers to Mizzou, and this guy wasn't able to get a scholarship. Ends up walking on to the Tigers And what does he do? Ends up stealing the starting job away from Nathaniel Pete. And then 2023 leads the SEC in rushing with over 1,600 yards, 5.8 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns. Also had 21 receptions out of the backfield. This is a guy that ran for over 100 yards against both Georgia and Ohio State in 2023. The only running back to make that claim. These are two of the top defenses in the country, and he was still able to do that. You love the contact balance. 851 yards after contact, 51 missed tackles forced. 39 runs of 10 plus yards, and he just seemed to get better and better as the game went along. Cody Schrader, to me, went from a guy that nobody really knew to Burlsworth Trophy winner, and then finished 8th in the Heisman. And he went from being an undrafted free agent, really an afterthought, to a guy that I think is going to find himself drafted. And I think he'll be a much better pro than people are giving him credit. Want to see what he can do there at the Senior Bowl against a lot of these guys. I think he'll be someone that'll turn heads and have people saying, what in the world did I just see? I think Kamani Vidal out of Troy, I think people want to see what he can do with this group, elevating his game, playing group of 5. Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, Jawar Jordan out of Louisville, speed merchants on the outside. That's something that you want to see that speed on display. Imani Bailey, 5'8", 201. 2023 was really the big year, over 1,200 yards on the ground. Finally got a chance to really showcase what he could do, and so he'll be a guy that's going to be tested quite a bit. Is he a one-year wonder? That's going to be a big question mark. And then Dylan Lobby out of New Hampshire, 5'10", 207 pounds. You want to talk about a guy that, the receiving is what really turns your head. Over 1,200 yards on the ground in 2022, but this guy, 117 receptions in the last 2 seasons, including 68 catches for 699 yards, 10.3 yards per reception, and 7 touchdowns in 2023 to go along with 715 yards on the ground and 9 touchdowns. The receiving yards, we see some receivers with those types of numbers, so he's a guy that I think want to see what he can do with that step up in competition. They'll be going up against safeties and linebackers. I think when we look at the linebacker position, I look at a guy like Payton Wilson and I say, yeah, this is the guy. If you're going to try to find somebody who's going to be the next Jack Campbell, a guy that could potentially sneak his way into round number 1, Payton Wilson would be the guy had it not been for the shoulder and knee injuries. But when this guy's been healthy, the guy is special. Just the instincts, they're off the charts. 402 tackles, including 138 this past season, 48 tackles for loss, 15 sacks, 7 interceptions, 13 pass breakups, and a partridge in a pear tree. This is a guy that's going to showcase his ability to run sideline to sideline. He can blitz and get after the quarterback, but he can also drop into coverage. He's a complete 3-down linebacker. To me, look, if he doesn't get drafted in round number 1, which the likelihood of that happening is probably not going to happen, but if he falls to day 2, let me just remind you that there was a guy by the name of Fred Warner who was drafted number 70 overall by the San Francisco 49ers in the 2018 draft. Now, we talked about Payton's numbers. Let's look at Fred Warner at BYU, shall we? 262 tackles, 32.5 for loss, 6.5 sacks, 7 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. My goodness, they sound very similar, don't they? And Warner was 6'4", 230 pounds there at BYU. Payton Wilson, 6'4", 235. If he falls to round number 3, someone is getting a steal. We already saw that with Fred Warner. We could see the same exact thing with Payton Wilson. I think he's a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro just waiting to happen as long as he can stay healthy. That's the big question mark right now. Cedric Gray out of North Carolina, 6'2", 235, a tackling machine. See that sideline to sideline ability. I think that's something that's going to be on display for sure. Look, another guy that people are really going to be looking for, the next Dre Greenlaw. Who's that going to be? A guy that ends up falling to round number 5, number 148 overall by the Niners. They're at Arkansas. 321 tackles in his career, 13 tackles for loss, had 3 interceptions. But a guy that, frankly, the linebacker position has been devalued to some degree, and I really don't know why, because you look at San Francisco, that linebacker play has really catapulted them into being the defense that they are. You saw Alex Anzalone stepping up and making some big plays there for the Lions down the stretch. From Willie Gay to Leo Chenal to Nick Bolton when he's been healthy, KC getting linebacker play as well. Teams at the top, their linebackers are a big important piece of that. And so I look at Tyron Hopper out of Missouri, over 200 tackles, 29 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, 9 pass breakups to go along with an interception, 6'2", 228 pounds. Is he a guy that could potentially fit that Dre Greenlaw mold? It's a possibility. How about Tyrus Knight out of UTEP, the Miners? This is a guy that is a tackling machine. 6'2", 240 pounds, 140 tackles this past season, 15.5 going for loss, 4.5 sacks, 7 pass breakups, a couple of fumble recoveries and a forced fumble. Guys all over the field, just under 400 tackles, 32 going for loss in his career, 8.5 sacks overall. He's a guy that I think could end up really improving that draft stock, get into that 4th to 5th round range. I think it'll be in that early to mid day 3 conversation. Edifon Olafosho, 6'1", 235, an undersized linebacker there out of Washington. But what I love about Olafosho is that coverage ability. You saw that on display in the national championship, taking on Roman Wilson, a guy that was showing blitz and then able to get outside on that out route on that 4th and 2 play attack, really had his back turned to the quarterback and was still able to get his hand in and make a play on the football. The big question is going to be health with him. I think that's really going to be the key thing there. And because look, this was his first year where he played an entire season. Just 5 games in 2022, 4 in 2020, 9 in 20. Obviously there was COVID there, but 6 in 2021, 9 in 2019. So this is a guy, can he stay healthy? That's going to be a big question mark. But, he's a guy that is worth a late round flyer because of his ability to drop into coverage. I'm curious to see what Nathaniel Watson is going to look like. A guy that nobody's really talking about. He's 6'2", 245 pounds, but a guy that just has that ability to get after the quarterback. I think a lot of talk, rightfully so, about Edgerrin Cooper, but at 6'2", 245, this is a guy that racks up 137 tackles, 13 for loss, including 10 sacks, 21 in his career, 35 going for loss, 377 total tackles. Can he drop into coverage? That's a big question mark for me, because this is a guy that makes a lot of tackles, makes a lot of plays. Obviously, when you talk about defensive tackles, Nathan Pickering and Jaden Crumedy really kept he and Jet Johnson clean, and they were able to make a lot of plays. So, Jaden, I think Pickering is at the East-West Shrine game, but Jaden Crumedy, that D tackle, is going to be at this game. Want to see what he could do, eating up blockers and allowing those linebackers to make some plays behind him. But I think Nathaniel Watson is the guy. A team is going to be very surprised and very happy with him at sometime on day 3, 5th, 6th round. I think he's a guy, if he can showcase his ability to drop into coverage, then that's something that I'm really going to be excited for. Jalix Hunt out of Houston Baptist, 6'4", 246, transfer from Cornell, was a Southland Conference Defensive Player of the Year. A guy that can definitely get after the quarterback, covers a lot of ground in coverage, even against slot receivers at times, which I thought was crazy. I had to, when I heard about that, I had to see the film for myself. But a guy that is a tremendous athlete, and I think that's one of the big reasons why that they got him onto the field. But 20.5 tackles for loss in his 2 seasons there at Houston Baptist, 13.5 sacks, an interception, 5 pass breakups. A guy that, again, the athleticism for days, and then you love the size. I mean, he's a big dude and flies around at 6'4", 248 pounds. Guy that played some end-to-end linebacker for them. I'm curious to see what he looks like, and can he stack up against these guys at the FBS level. And then finally, we got to get to the safeties real quick before we wrap up the podcast. Cam Kinchens is the top safety. I mean, where do you put Cooper DeJean? Is he a safety? Is he a corner? Is he a nickel? Is he a slot guy? All he is a football player. I mean, the guy, the versatility, he's a playmaker. He'll be a first rounder. Is Cam Kinchens going to be a first rounder? Maybe, maybe not. But look, 5'11", 202, a guy that knows how to make plays, 11 interceptions in his career, 15 pass breakups, tremendous range. That's one of the things that's so impressive on the back end. He covers a lot of ground, but then he's not afraid to stick his nose in the running game as well. I think that's something that you want to see. Can he cover? I think he can. I think we saw some of that this year, not only covering ground on the back end, but also the coverability. That's something that I think teams are really going to be looking forward to seeing. Javon Bullard out of Georgia, 5'11", 195. Javon Bullard is another guy that I think is going to be a top safety in this draft class. He can play corner. He can cover. Has pretty good ball skills. A guy that likes to play around the box, but then he'll also get back and showcase that range. So that's something that we're going to be looking forward to seeing. Jaden Hicks out of Washington State, 6'3", 209. Just want to see how fluid this guy is. He's a taller safety, so you worry about stiffness in the hips. He's one of the more fluid guys on the back end, though. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Jalen Simpson out of Auburn, 6'1", 178. He's played a lot of positions there for the Tigers, and just was a veteran leader for the Tigers, and obviously the best secondary guy. They've got 3 secondary players here at the draft with, at the Senior Bowl with Nehemiah Pritchett and DJ James as well. And when you watch Jalen Simpson, I think safety really was his best fit. 4 interceptions this past season, took one of those back to the house. So he's a guy that I think teams are going to want to see what he can do, cover, not only with the coverage ability, but also what he can do on the back end, see some of those instincts. Tyke Smith out of Georgia, I think he really got on everybody's radar with some nice years there at West Virginia. Kind of an undersized guy, he's only 5'10", 198, but he's physical and a guy that's going to look to make plays on the football. Have 4 interceptions in his 2 years there at West Virginia. Played in just 1 game in 2021, season-ending injury. But 2023 was his best year. Really got a chance to be that nickel and star back, if you will. 70 total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, couple of sacks, 4 interceptions. Did a little bit of everything on the back end. And that's something that I think teams are going to be wanting to look for here. Bo Brady out of Maryland, 6'1", 210, physical presence at the safety position. Sione Vaki, only a redshirt sophomore, 6', 208. I think he was a bit of a surprise that he was coming out, but also a guy that is just a damn good football player. They lined him up in the backfield this past season. 42 carries, 317 yards, 2 touchdowns, also had 11 receptions. When we're talking about guys, you think about Shohei Ohtani playing both sides, pitching and hitting. You're seeing a lot more of that. Obviously Travis Hunter playing corner and receiver there at Colorado. People weren't really talking about Vaki with that as much. 51 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. His presence was really felt around the line of scrimmage. I think Cole Bishop, you saw more of him on the back end. But Vaki was a guy that really wanted to deliver the big hit and wanted to make his presence felt. Want to see what he can do, though, on the back end, in coverage. What does he look like there? A couple of guys out of the state of Oregon. Evan Williams, 6'1", 194, physical presence, started his career at Fresno State. Keaton Oladapo, a veteran guy there, 6'1", 194, made a ton of plays for the Beavers. Veteran presence yet again. So those are guys that I'm definitely excited to see and really see what they can do. Can they drop into coverage a little bit? Can they line up against the receivers, maybe the tight ends and running backs? What are we going to see there? And then Malik Mustafa. This guy is interesting. 5'11", 207 out of Wake Forest. You see his ability to close in a hurry coming downhill. Watch that Florida State game. Deep ball thrown to Darian Williamson on a post. Gets the depth, made a leaping play on the ball, knocked it away. This guy has a 36-inch vertical leap, 23 miles an hour on the GPS, and then a 1,300-pound lifter for the bench squat and clean. So you think about the athletic freak, you think about him as a workout warrior at the combine, but he's also a guy that can make plays on the back end of a defense. And so he's another guy that I think might be flying under the radar a little bit that people aren't really talking about. But 80 tackles this past season, had a pick, a couple of pass breakups, 5 tackles for loss, has 15 tackles for loss and 4 sacks in his career. But again, can he be a playmaker in coverage? Does he have the ball skills? That's something we saw that against Florida State. Didn't really see a ton of that as the season progressed. So really the big question mark is going to be, can he do that on a consistent basis, play in and play out with a lot of these reps, especially in the one-on-ones. Can't leave this without talking about the specialists. Will Reichard, Josh McCarty, 2 of the best kickers in all of college football. Will Reichard, just missed 2 extra points, 84% field goal percentage. It was 119 of 119 in the last 2 years with his extra points. Just seemed to be a big-time pressure kicker there for Bama. And then Joshua Carty out of Stanford, 6'3", 205. Missed just 1 extra point, 72 of 73 in 3 years, 85% field goal percentage. These are 2 guys that I think could absolutely get themselves drafted as kickers. But I think the guy that everyone wants to watch is Tory Taylor out of Iowa. 6'4", 231. He's a big dude. I mean, he comes from Australia, that Aussie punter, and really just turned into kind of a cult hero there for Iowa, a team that really had no offense, and really their offense was the punter because he was able to really change field position in favor of the Iowa Hawkeyes. A guy, 46.3 yards per punt in his career, over 13,000 yards, 13,657 to be exact. This past season, really upped his game, 48.2 yards per punt on 93 punts. That's insane. The flip side of that, Austin McNamara out of Texas Tech, who had 46.3 yards per punt on just 55. So 55 total punts. I mean, it's insane. Over 4,400 yards this past season. The Ray Guy Award winner, I mean, of course, it had to be, right? He's the guy that everybody tuned in to watch. I think if a team is looking for a punter, Tory Taylor is going to be a guy that's going to hear his name called earlier on day 3 than I think a lot of people are going to be expecting. A lot of fun to watch. So those are the guys. Obviously, the long snappers. Peter Bowden there at Wisconsin, 6'2", 230 pounds, played in 27 games for the Badgers. And then William Mote out of Georgia, 6'2", 230 pounds, 29 games played there. 14 in each of the last 2 seasons for the Bulldogs. That kind of rounds everything out. So those are the guys, the specialists. They don't get a lot of love, a lot of times. We only know their names usually if they make a mistake. Bad snap with the long snappers, missed kick, a shank punt. But these are guys that I wanted to give some love at the end of the podcast because they're guys that could be difference makers at the end of games. And really that's something that the momentum shifts with a huge punt. They could really come in handy for a team, and I think teams will be on their eye watching the special teams as well. So there's my comprehensive look at the Senior Bowl. Took a look at a lot of guys that I'm going to be looking forward to seeing play. It's not just the one-on-ones. We're going to see a lot of the different drills, and then also on game day, who are the guys that are going to be able to play well when the lights are brightest. And I think we're going to know a lot more about who a lot of these guys are at the end of this week of practice and after the game there on February 3rd, and then we'll get ready for the combine. We'll know who the invites are. We'll take a look at all 300 plus guys that'll be invited to the combine. Take a look at the guys that we want to keep an eye out for, and we'll do that combine preview. And then after the combine, obviously we'll be breaking down each of the positions, who really stood out both positively and negatively, as we then start springboarding into talking about free agency, talking about the individual workouts, and really start molding the mock drafts and really getting that picture at that point of the draft boards will really start to become a lot clearer. So hope you've enjoyed the ride to this point, and you'll stick around for some more. Until next time, everyone, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your week, and until next time, I am out of here.